somewhere between the Bahamas and Florida, 1994, 5 days from home. The night sky was so clear Isabel could see the Milky Way. Her gaze was on the stars, but she wasn't really looking at them. She wasn't really looking at anything. Her eyes were blurry from tears. Next to her, Senora Castillo sobbed in her husband's arms, her shoulders heaving. Like Isabel, she had been crying ever since Ivan died. Senor Castillo stared out over his wife's head, his eyes vacant. Louis kicked out under the silent engine, rattling the bolts that held it down. He buried his face in his hands, and Amara hugged him tight. Ivan was dead. Isabel couldn't grasp it. One minute he had been alive, talking to them, laughing with them, and the next he was dead, lifeless, like every other Cuban who had ever died trying to get to El Norte by sea. But Ivan wasn't someone nameless, faceless person. He was Ivan, her Ivan. He was her friend, and he was dead. Isabel's eyes drifted down to where Ivan's body lay, but she still didn't look right at him. Couldn't. Even though Poppy had taken down the shirt he draped over Mommy to shade her and laid it across Ivan's face, Isabel couldn't bear to look. She knew Ivan's face, his smile. She wanted to think of him that way. Lito sang a low, sad song, and Isabel retreated into the arms of her mother and father. The three of them huddled together as if what happened to Ivan might happen to them too if they came too close to his body. But the real threat was the sinking boat and the sharks that still circled it, followed by the trail of bloody water that started at Isabel's feet. Fidel Castro and Ivan's blood all over him. Isabel remembered the wake for her grandmother. It had been quiet, somber occasion. There hadn't even been a body to bury. Those who had come had spent most of their time comforting Lito and Mommy and Isabel, hugging them and kissing them and sharing their grief. Isabel knew she could do that for now for the Castillos, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. How could she comfort the Castillos when she still needed comforting herself? Ivan was their son, their brother, but he was Isabel's best friend. In some ways, she knew him better even than his family did. She played soccer with him in the alley, swam with him in the sea, sat next to him in school. She'd eaten dinner at his house, and he is hers so many times they might as well have been brother and sister. Isabel and Ivan had grown up together. She couldn't imagine a world where she would run next door and he wouldn't be there. But Ivan wouldn't be coming over anymore. Ivan was dead. The loss of him ached like a part of Isabel was suddenly missing, like her heart had been ripped out of her chest and all that was left was a giant gaping hole. She shook again as her body was racked with sobs, and Mommy pulled her closer. After a time, Isabel's grandfather finally spoke. "We need to do something," he said, "with the body." Senora Castillo wailed, but Senor Castillo nodded. "Do something with the body?" Isabel looked around. But what was there to be done with Ivan's body on this little raft? And then Isabel understood. There was only one place for Ivan's body to go. Into the sea. The thought made her recoil in terror. No, we can't leave him here," Isabel cried. "He'll be all alone. Ivan never liked to be alone." Lito nodded to Isabel's father, and the two of them stood to lift Ivan out of the small boat. Isabel fought to get free of her mother, but Mommy held her tight. "Wait!" Senora Castillo said. She pulled herself away from her husband, her face streaked with tears. "We have to say something, a prayer, something. I want God to know that Ivan is coming." Isabel had never been to church. When Castro and the communists had taken over, they had discouraged the practice of religion. But Spanish Catholics had conquered the island before Castro had, and Isabel knew their religion was still there. Deep down, the way Lito told her, clave was buried beneath the audible rhythms of a song. Lito was the eldest and had been of the most funerals, so he took charge. He made a sign of the cross over Ivan's body and said, "Eternal rest grant upon him, O Lord, and let perpetual light shine upon him. May he rest in peace. Amen." Senora Castillo nodded, and Lito and Isabel's father picked up Ivan's body. No! Isabel cried. She reached out as if to stop them, then pulled her hands back and clasped them to her chest. She knew they had to do this. That way they could not keep Ivan on the boat with them, not like this. But as she watched Lito and Poppy lift up Ivan's body, the empty place inside got bigger and bigger until she was more empty than full. She wished she was dead, too. She wished she was so dead they'd put her into the water with Ivan, so she could keep him company in the deep. Senora Castillo reached out and took her son's hand one last time, and Louise stood and put her hand to Ivan's chest, one last connection to his brother, before he was gone for good. Isabel wanted to do something, to say something, but she was so overcome with grief. "Wait," Louise said. He pulled his pistol from the holster. His face turned mean as he aimed it over the other side of the boat at one of the fins that skimmed the surface. Isabel was ready for the shots this time, but they made her jump. Bang! 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 The shark died in a bloody, thrashing spasm, and the other sharks that had been following the boat fell on a frenzy. Louis nodded to Lido, and Isabel's father and Signora Castello looked as they slipped Ivan off the other side of the boat, away from the sharks, where he sank into the Black Sea. No one spoke. Isabel cried, the tears coming without end, flowing up from the hollow place in her chest that threatened to consume her. Ivan was gone. Forever. Isabel suddenly remembered Ivan's industrial's cap. Where was it? What had happened to it? It hadn't been on him when he'd put him back in the water, and Isabel wanted to find it, needed to find it. That was something she could do. A piece of him she could keep close to her. She pulled away from her mother and searched the little boat for it. It had to be somewhere. Yes, there! Floating upside down in the bloody water underneath one of the benches, she plucked it up and held it to her chest, the only part of Ivan she had left. I wanted to open a restaurant, Signor Castello said. He was right next to her, and the sound of his voice, almost a whisper, made Isabel jump. When we were talking the first night, everybody was telling each other what they wanted to do when they got to the U.S., Signor Castello went on. But I never said. I wanted to open a restaurant with my sons. Something sparkled in the dark horizon, and at first Isabel took one of the stars and the white scar of the Milky Way twinkling in her watery eyes, but no, it was too bright, too orange. And there were others just like it, all clustered in a horizontal line, separating the black waters from the Black Sea. It was Miami, at last. Ivan had just missed seeing Miami. All right, we're on page 229, Mahood. Macedonia Sea to Serbia, 2015, 14 to 15 days from home. Mahood felt like he was back in Syria. Policemen with guns guarded the border from Greece into Macedonia, and he felt dirty again. Unwanted, illegal. Even without travel papers, Mahood and his family had been unable to exchange their Syrian pounds for euros and buy train tickets to Athens, and from there to the little Greek town near the border of Macedonia. Now they were headed for the Macedonia town of Javalja, where they hoped to catch a train north to Serbia, and from there to Hungary. But first they had to find a way to sneak across the border. Mahood pointed out a little tangle of tents and laundry lines just off the gravel road, and Mahood's father pulled them into the camp to plan their next move. It was another little refugee village, the kind of makeshift town Mahood had seen again and again on the road out of Syria. Mahood and his father hunkered down behind the trash barrel and watched the border crossing. The Macedonian police weren't turning people away, but they might be checking papers. And Mahood's family hadn't waited in Athens for official travel permits. Mahood's dad pulled out his iPhone and consulted the map. This whole area is farmland, his father said. Flat land, too easy to be caught. He scrolled sideways on the map, and Mahood leaned in closer. It looks like there's a forest here to the west, Dad said. They can't have every meter of the border guarded. We'll slip through at night. Once we're in Macedonia, we'll be all right. Where's your mother? Mahood looked up. Mom was where she always was, working her way through the tents looking for Hannah. Hannah wasn't there, though, and she wasn't at any of the other little clusters of refugee tents they passed as they hiked farther into the countryside. At some place, he'd picked up the map on his iPhone. Mahood's father led them off a dirt road into a dark forest. It was late, well after midnight. Mahood was very weary from walking, but they still had 2 hours to walk to Macedonian border. Waleed raised his arms to be carried, and Dad hefted him up against his shoulders. Mahood bristled. Waleed was being a baby. He was too big to be carried. Mahood was tired too, but nobody carrying him. They walked along in silence, their way lit only by the occasional glow of the phone screen as Dad checked their position. The forest was full of tall pine trees that crowded almost everything else out, and the ground was covered with brown pine needles that smelled like a car freshener. Somewhere in the forest an owl screeched, and Mahood heard the scurrying of small animals. Every rustle made Mahood jump, every scuffle gave him goosebumps. He was a city boy, used to the lights and the sounds of traffic. Here every sound was like a gunshot in the unearthly dark and quiet. It terrified Mahood. At last they emerged from the dark woods and found the train station. It was a small 2-story mustard-colored building with a burgundy roof and rounded gables. It was also packed with people. Hundreds of people slept outside, using their backpacks and trash bags as pillows. They filled the train platform and the sidewalks in the front of the station, and some even slept between the tracks. Plastic bottles and empty bags with discarded wrappers littered the ground. Mahood watched his father's shoulders sag. Mahood felt the same way. But then his father stood taller and hiked Waleed up higher of his shoulders. "Hey, at least I know we're going on the right track," he said. He grinned at Mahood. "The right track. Get it?" Mahood got it. He just didn't think any of this was funny. "No? Nothing?" his father said. "I guess I need to train you better." Mahood still didn't laugh. He was too tired. Mahud's mother had already left them, stepping carefully among the sleeping refugees like a ghost, searching for Hana. The train station looks closed, Mahud's father told him. We'll have to find some place to sleep. We'll come back in the morning and see if we can buy tickets. They found a nearby hotel listed on TripAdvisor, and they collected Mahud's mother to set out the inn on foot. Mahud couldn't wait to climb into a real bed. He felt like he could sleep for days. A car came up behind them, and this time Mahud didn't jump out in front of it, but it slowed down and stopped beside them anyway. You need a taxi? The man said in broken Arabic. No, Mahud's father, we're just going to the hotel. Hotel much money, the man said. You go to Serbia, I take you in taxi, 25 euros each. Mahud did the math. 100 euros was a lot of money, almost 24,000 Syrian pounds. But a taxi ride straight to Serbia without spending the night or longer in Macedonia? Mahud's parents huddled together and Mahud listened in. Train tickets were likely cheaper, and Mom worried about accepting a ride from a strange man in the country they didn't know. But Dad argued there wasn't another train until at least tomorrow, and there were already so many people waiting in line at the train station. We're all tired. And the taxi driver gets us closer to Germany. Sleeping on the ground doesn't, Mahud threw in. That's the deciding vote then, Dad said. We'll take the car. It was a good decision. 2 hours and 100 euros later, they were at the Serbian border. It was still dark, but there were no border guards where the driver dropped them off, no roads either. Mahud had slept a little in the car, but he felt like a zombie as he shambled with his family along the railroad tracks that would take them across the border from Macedonia to the nearest Serbian town. Since they were traveling, they were permitted to skip their early morning prayers. They staggered into a town just after sunup. Mahud thought that if he didn't lie down somewhere and sleep, he would pass out on his feet and fall flat on his face. But there were even more refugees at the train station than there had been in Macedonia. And there were no tents and no hotel rooms. People slept on the platform of the station or outside in the fields. There were no toilets either, and no markets or restaurants. What the little local Serbs had, they were charging a fortune for. One man was selling water bottles for 5 euros apiece. A group of men sat around a power strip charging their phones as they were huddled around a campfire. Mahud had seen scenes like this everywhere along the route from Athens to Germany. He and his family paused just long enough to recharge their own phones again, and they were on the move once more. Mahud was so tired he wanted to cry. His father found them a bus to Belgrade, and Mahud was thankful for a few hours' sleep, uncomfortable though they were. And almost sundown when they arrived in the Serbian capital, but they still couldn't stop. The police were raiding hotels for illegal refugees, so Dad found another taxi driver who promised to take them the 2 hours farther than the Hungarian border. Taxis were expensive, but so was trying to stay overnight in a city that didn't want you. The silver four-door Volkswagen was driven by a middle-aged, olive-skinned Serbian man with a neatly trimmed black beard. He promised to get them to Hungary and keep them away from the police for 30 euros apiece, more than it cost them to cross all of Macedonia. It was a tight fit in the car with Mahud, his mother, his father crammed in the back seat and Walid in his father's lap. This new driver seemed to find every rut and hole in the road and send them flying into each other, but none of that mattered to Mahud. He was asleep almost as soon as he closed his eyes, and he only woke up when he realized the car wasn't moving. Had it really been 2 hours already? He felt like he'd just fallen asleep. Mahud's eyelids fluttered and he looked out the window. He expected to see the lights of the Serbian border, another tent city. Instead, they were stopped in the middle of a lonely stretch of highway surrounded by dark, empty fields, and the taxi driver was leaning over the back seat with a pistol aimed straight at them.